Welcome back to the program, everybody. Today we have Alexandra Jackiw. Alexandra, is a practitioner of Chinese medicine and so much more. I actually have written down a lot of the things that I want to get to today because there is so much material that we can cover in this single interview. So yeah, Alexandra, take it away. Like, just give us some background of what it is that you do here at Heartspring Healing, which is the facility that we're in right now. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Heartspring Health.
Heartspring Health.
So close, just a few letters different.
I mean, it's my first time here, so
yeah,
and it takes a couple times. Yeah. Okay.
So I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner, and I use acupuncture and Asian body work and Chinese herbs to treat people for all different kinds of conditions. I largely treat mental and emotional conditions, but I also treat pain, and as we all know, so much of our physical body is tied up in our mental and emotional bodies as well, so I'm always keeping kind of some focus on soothing the spirit, I guess you would say, to facilitate the body's own natural healing process.
What are some of the things that, some of the modalities that you use to bring about healing and trauma and pain in general?
Well, I would say my style of acupuncture focuses on that particular kind of lens by really bringing the person receiving the acupuncture into an embodied experience of what's happening. So there's so many different sensations and also emotions and experiences that can come up during acupuncture, and so I really invite people to kind of stay with their sensory experience of what's happening, because there's a lot of healing that can happen and also a lot of information that can kind of become apparent to both of us as we move through an acupuncture treatment. And then herbs, of course, are something that I love to use. And I started getting into herbalism with Western native plants and studied with people who would take us out into the field, and we'd learn how to identify plants and harvest them. And I think I'm really blessed for the teachers I've had in that world, because I was introduced to it as plant medicine is about communication between two different species. So the plants themselves are living beings that also have an experience of the world and have particular wisdom and personality. And so that's kind of what brought me into the world of healing, and I'm really grateful for that, because there, I'm not sure if there is that belief in Chinese medicine, at least the way it's taught now, that doesn't really come into play, but it may be that, the roots of this medicine are shamanic, so it may be that thousands of years ago, the people who were making these formulas and designing them did have that really close relationship with plants and understood that they had, their own special medicine and are more like us than they are different from us. Yeah,
I mean, it's certainly, say Chinese medicine, certainly, we're in our own culture here. We're, in the United States, but we have our own culture, but there's certainly some wisdom to be integrated into our society that would, that is ancient, and as you say, maybe shamanic. But yeah, I like it. So what you say you do is with the herbs, you put together formulas of communication, essentially, with different plants. Is that sort of what I'm getting at? Like, to communicate with people's biology, or mind or spirit, or how does that work?
Yeah. I think that's really an astute way to, excuse me, to look at it. And in Chinese medicine, plants are always used in formulas, so you're never using a single herb. So the formulas have their own personality as well. And so the way that I prescribe is I use classical formulas. So I don't really modify a whole lot yet, because I don't feel like I've gotten to that place in my career. I feel like the classical formulas are just really elegant in the way that they're put together, and so I draw mainly from them. And I try to match the formula with a pattern in the body, and try to help bring the person into relationship with the formula. So setting aside time to take the herbs and really taste them and notice if anything happens in your body immediately, like really kind of tracking the whole picture, like how is the formula relating to biology and also emotion and even dream life, that sort of thing.
I like what you said, like patterns that we have in our system that maybe need to be released or upgraded or updated. Is that maybe, is that sort of what you're getting at as far as like using herbs to connect with these patterns and change them? Is that sort of what you would be getting at?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, the patterns are kind of like a clue to what formula might be helpful. And people will often say, like, is this, you know, they'll come in with a few complaints and then I'll prescribe a formula and they'll say, is this a formula for my headaches or is this a formula for my insomnia? And it's not really appropriate to think about it that way, because from the lens of Chinese medicine, it really is about, like you said, the pattern. And so as we work with those patterns to transform them and change them, then you expect everything to sort of come back into balance if it's the right formula. And so it, you know, we don't prescribe formulas for symptoms specifically, we prescribe them for patterns or people, really. Right,
like the root cause, maybe?
Yeah.
And that's so interesting. You do have some prior experience with patterns, you have behavior, and so you do have like a background in that. You were telling me that you dealt with people that were dealing with addictions and trauma. You want to tell us a little bit about that and your experience with that, and maybe how it's helped you maybe now understand patterns a little better in people.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was in school, my last year of school was an internship, and I did a lot of work at various community clinics. And I worked in substance abuse recovery at a couple different levels. So I worked with people who were in acute detox. So they would come in literally, you know, from their life, whether it was off the street or if they had a home and a job and a family, people with all different backgrounds. And this was like their first step to recovery, to getting sober. So those people are dealing with a lot of, you know, withdrawal, and it's a pretty extreme stage. And then I also worked with people who were post-acute withdrawal, so they were, you know, a month out or so, and they were in various programs to kind of help stabilize them in the life that they wanted to be in, like a clean and sober lifestyle. So I did acupuncture with both of those populations and learned so much. And even though I haven't really pursued that now in my career, I feel like it informs my work a lot. Because what I would find working with people is that what we consider to be a pathology, you know, say an addiction, a heroin addiction or alcohol addiction, is really an attempt on the person's part to remain a whole person. You know, like all these folks, especially in the beginning when they come in and we take an intake, I would just learn about all these patterns, individual patterns of pain and suffering, and then also collective patterns, you know, poverty and like the Native American population in this part of the world, and these, you know, karmas is another word for people basically expressing these patterns in their body. And drugs and alcohol was how they figured out how to live while expressing those patterns of pain and suffering. So it sort of helped shift my perspective on what disease is, because it isn't the body going wrong. It really is the body trying to stay whole and trying to stay vibrant. And you know, people work with what they have. We do the best we can. And so we're limited, and that's what gives rise to pathology. But ultimately, it's coming from a place of intelligence, I think, in the body.
So would you say that there's maybe a parallel between, you know, maybe some of these patterns of behavior, such as addiction, poverty, which is, you know, maybe an outside condition, and, you know, because we're talking mainly, I mean, we've talked a lot about brain trauma, and that's sort of for one flashlight, that's sort of where we start from. But you know, trauma is trauma, and is there any, are there similarities in these conditions that you see in people, you know, in your treatments? when you go to treat people with these different kinds of patterns?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the thing that pops to mind first, the common thread is embodiment, or disembodiment, I guess. So I think people who suffered trauma, which is pretty much all of us, but you know, those maybe who've suffered a greater trauma, the way that we tend to cope is either by going way out here and sort of disconnecting with our body and the discomfort, or shrinking really deeply inside, and it's a different type of disconnection, but it still is sort of a disconnection. So I think for people with whatever type of trauma they're healing from, that embodiment is such a huge piece of that. Coming back into the physical form, because it's a tool. It's a tool that has a lot to offer us in our healing path.
Well, it's just so interesting when you talk about getting to the root cause of a pathology or disease, or seems like we have so many labels for things of what people are dealing with. But it sounds like what you're talking about, getting to the core of it, you know, it almost simplifies the equation into, like what you just said, you know, either, you know, two types of things, you know, one being out of your body, your consciousness being out of your body and not wanting to deal with it, or being sunken in yourself so much that you can't get out, or whatever. I love that. It seems so simple. It doesn't say easy, but it just does seem to simplify things quite a bit for people. If they can understand it that way. Yeah, I think that's what has drawn me to Chinese medicine, and really natural healthcare and traditional medicines from all over the world. There's a simplicity to it, you know, there's an elegance to it. And I don't like to speak poorly about Western medicine, because it's really, it's a wonderful tool for many of us, and for most of us. Yet I feel like there's an inaccessibility there, because it's complicated in a way that other medicines aren't. There are some complications. I have, you know, Western medicine saved my life. It put me back together, and I feel so grateful and fortunate to have been in a place where I had that opportunity to have been worked on and been repaired in that way. However, healing, you know, in my situation required something a little more and holistic. But how do you feel there's a lot of crossover in some of the things that you do here? And you also, this is one of the many things that you do, you also are a practitioner of or an instructor of Hatha Yoga, is that correct?
Yeah.
So maybe tell us a little bit about that, and are there any things that cross over? Like, are you ever like practicing, you know, your medicine here in this clinic, Chinese medicine, and like using some of the tools that maybe you use in Hatha and vice versa, or do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, there is a lot of crossover, and I'm kind of exploring what that is right now. I mean, for me personally, the crossover is just that they have both been huge contributors to my own kind of evolution and my own healing, and but yeah, you know, I'm exploring the ways that those two can be integrated and complementary to each other in a way that I can explain it and offer it to people. They both have a really strong tradition of understanding the energetic body and understanding that the physical body is actually subsequent to the energetic body, so it emerges out of it, as opposed to just being overlaid on it or something, but that how things flow in our bodies energetically through the meridians in Chinese medicine, or the nadis in yogic Ayurvedic medicine, gives rise to physical form. And so both modalities really work with keeping the channels open and stabilizing health that way, whether it's with needles or movement and breath and meditation.
I think that you're being a little modest, because you've already integrated these a little bit, because I know that we is it called Ocean of Surrender?
Yes.
Would you like to talk about that? Because that is one place where you have integrated these, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
So Ocean of Surrender was a series of restorative yoga workshops that I offered with co-yoga teacher and massage therapist Angèle St. Pierre.
Mm.
And so we brought our brains and hearts together and figured out how, where we overlapped is that we both really enjoy helping people find states of deep relaxation,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's in the yoga studio or on the treatment table.
Mm-hmm.
And so restorative yoga is such a wonderful way to do that. So we designed a workshop that led people through a restorative series of postures. We also used a little bit of sound and mantra singing to kind of help, bring people into that place of calm nervous system and tranquil mind. And then at the end of the session, I offered just a very kind of simple 1 or 2 needle acupuncture treatment to people who are interested.
Mm-hmm.
So I got really good feedback from people that that was a nice element, and it gave me the opportunity to kind of bring things together, because oftentimes when I see people here, they might be coming from work, or they're in the midst of their day. They haven't just spent an hour and a half trying to relax, doing yoga or meditation. So in that way, it seems like a really effective way to administer acupuncture treatment after someone's already done all this work to really, get kind of deep, and then the needles just have that much more power.
Yeah, I mean, I personally experienced this, but I think the day that I went, you were doing acupressure. However, I can say from my personal experience that when I went in there, I was high strung that day. I had a lot of stress and things going on, and I remember I went in and I saw you. I was like, "Oh, hey, Alexandra," and whatever, and just mind moving 1,000 miles an hour. When I left, I was just floating, and like. So if your intention is to have people come to a relaxed, calm, non-stressful state, it certainly achieved that goal with me. And further, you were talking about, we were talking about trauma, and you were talking about how a lot of times people are out of their body during trauma because they don't want to maybe acknowledge or feel the pain. First of all, like why is it, do you think, we get knocked out of our bodies? Is it because there's a resistance to being immersed in pain? And secondly, do you think that maybe hatha yoga or yoga in general is a good way to reintegrate spirit and body?
Yeah. Well, I can definitely say yes to the second question.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really powerful tool for that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good question. Like, why is that such a common coping mechanism to kind of come out of the body? And I don't know if I really have an answer for that.
That may be a subjective question, I mean, it may just, there may not be a definitive answer, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
And yes, so okay, well, first I'll let you answer that. Do you have anything else to say about that?
Well, one thing, to bring it back to kind of more of a real tangible physical level, trauma in Chinese medicine is often results in some kind of a stuck blood situation usually. And it's really easy to conceptualize that in terms of physical trauma, like we hit ourselves, there's some kind of impact, and then we have a bruise, But I think that can happen with emotional trauma as well, that there is some sort of an impact, and then we contract, something gets stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And our essence isn't as able to like really fill us up because there's something stuck there, something that needs to be moved and cleared. Makes me think about animals who go through trauma, like wild animals. They often will go through this like seizure that happens after they are being, pursued by a predator or something, and then, it's like 10 minutes of doing that, and then they're done. Like they moved whatever it was that got stuck.
Okay.
And
yeah.
then they don't have that trauma to carry around with them anymore.
So yeah, I guess the key then is maybe finding the healthy way to move that energy so it doesn't get stuck. That's just, is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, well, I certainly know in my own experience that being out of my body, it certainly took me a while to come back in. And I remember early on that the pain was unbearable. And so as much as I may have thought mentally, hey, I want to be in my body or whatever, my spirit was like, yeah, let's turn the pain down a little bit and then we'll stick around full time, you know. That was my personal experience. I don't know that I experienced the other end of that. Maybe I did. If you said there's getting out of your body and then being closed in your body, like locked. Describe that manifestation, if you would. I'd like to get your take on the other end of that spectrum.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a different presentation. Someone kind of retreats into themselves for similar reasons, you know, that maybe stimulation or contact with the outside world is painful or overwhelming. And so coming in and really just sort of closing off from, you know, their own sensations and also their own feelings and just the world around them, people, relationships, work, you know, that sort of thing is a way to kind of, like you said, turn it down, turn the sensation down and just sort of bring it to a manageable level. Do you feel that that can be helpful for people? I mean, obviously taken to the extreme is not, but do you think some of that is do you find that some of that, do you recommend that for people, like, hey, you know, just relax, be in a, you know, nice, safe place, good environment? Is your experience, is that helpful for people? I do think it is, yeah. I think that that's really crucial. Whatever someone needs to do to feel like they're safe or in a safe container is really important. And then, like, maybe at a certain point down the line, that mechanism that helped them feel safe becomes a hindrance, and then they have, you know, another layer of healing to do. Because it's kind of step by step, isn't it? I mean, well, when talking about trauma, or, you know, yeah, for me, well, it was a step by step thing. I oftentimes remember biting off way more than I could chew, as far as stimulation goes, and then just being like, whoa, and then having to retreat into, like, I gotta cut everything out, you know, and so I guess maybe finding that balance is a good thing. Yeah. I'd like to talk about here. Well, this is just kind of a fun question, and I just want to throw this in there just to see where it goes. But what is your understanding and definition of chi force? If you could just sum it up and package it nicely so that we could all quantify that. That is a fantastic question. That is something we've talked about, that I think every Chinese medicine student practitioner talks about and thinks about a lot, and there's so many different theories on it. I think it's a real quantifiable phenomenon. I don't know if we have necessarily okay, or here's a better way to put it. I don't know if it's quantifiable in the sense that, like, we could build a machine to quantify it, but I do think it's quantifiable because, you know, Qigong masters and people who've developed their own Qi to a certain degree can absolutely quantify it. Sure. They can look at someone or take their pulse and say, this is where the Qi is, this is where it's not, this is the quality it has and the condition it's in. And, so I absolutely believe that it's something real as opposed to something more kind of ethereal or metaphorical. And it has a relationship with things that are more tangible as well. So, like blood, for instance, and Qi are very closely related. And so the blood follows the Qi. The Qi sort of gives the blood its structure and its ability to move throughout the body. And it does that for all the organs too. Each of the organs has its own Qi, and the condition of the Qi of each organ is expressed through its function and its structure. So I think it's sort of like at that bridge of maybe less manifest and more manifest. It's kind of like that portal between what is not yet here and what is very obviously here and solid.
Seen and unseen, and like matter and spirit, like that. Or because as I'm listening to you, I mean, it almost seems as you were talking about blood circulation and the chi, the blood following the chi. It's almost like the chi is the unseen version of the blood. It's just the pure energy, perhaps, and the same with the organ system. Okay, well, that brings us to meridians, and talking about meridians. And as I understand meridians, and again, I'm not as knowledgeable, nearly as knowledgeable as you are, but I understand meridians as energy channels that run through our physical body. Could you maybe touch on that a little bit for people who have no idea what meridians are and how they're useful for healing?
Yeah, I think that's a really good description of them. They are kind of like a skeleton in a way, in that they sort of form like a scaffolding that the body then is built off of, I guess you could say. And so they are the pathways for life, really, to flow through the body. And there's certain meridians called the extraordinary meridians that form while we're in utero. And those are like the very primordial meridians, basically. Like they're pre-organ, kind of individuation of tissues and cells and all that. They're just a real basic, like, beginning of life. And then the organs, the regular meridians, there's 12 of them, and they connect with the organs. That each of them has a relationship with an organ. So they are also sort of windows into the health of the organ as well, because they're more external to the organ and a little bit easier to kind of contact and quantify or measure how they're doing. These
energy pathways are unseen, correct? They're not something we necessarily see with our eyes, at least three-dimensionally.
Yeah. Although you can relate to them a little more closely than one may think. You can palpate them and feel blockages in them or healthy flow in them. You can see them sometimes. Certain meridians, based on what organs they're related to, will display certain colors, more likely to have certain colors, or when you press on them, certain qualities. Like for instance, the kidney meridian runs kind of this area here, and there's a lot of like bone in that area. It's kind of a little bit deeper in the body, which is, the kidneys are a very deep organ. And then the stomach channel runs alongside the outside of the tibia, and it's like kind of fleshy, right? And the stomach is responsible for creating the meat of the body, because it's the major digestive organ. So they do have, they're not as mysterious as
sure.
necessarily.
Well, certainly for somebody like you who studied them, I imagine, because these meridians, this is sort of your template for acupuncture, correct? Like, hitting on certain spots, and they relate to organ systems and healing ultimately. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the points that we tend to needle are along the meridians. And people practice different ways, and so some people will completely disregard the points at all and really just go on like meridian therapy type work, which is just palpating the meridians and seeing where is it stuck, where is it not stuck. Like, who cares if there's a point there or not? We want to feel what we can and then respond to that.
And then, as the individual points, how is that therapy different than meridian therapy?
They're interrelated. The individual points sort of have powers that they're known for, abilities that they're known for. So,
like each point has a name, or some of them do, correct?
Yeah, they all have names. It's true.
Yeah. Like I just in my personal experience, the bottom one on your foot is called, like, right in the middle of your foot. Isn't that bubbling spring? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Anyway, the names, they tend to kind of allude to the healing qualities, about what these, you know, stimulating these points can do. So I'm curious, because this I don't know anything about. What are some meridians or points, or like, is there, how do you even start to try to put together an acupuncture for somebody who's been dealing with trauma? I guess it maybe depends on the kind of trauma, or?
It definitely depends on the kind of trauma, yeah.
Okay.
Like for traumatic brain injury, you know, you would probably focus on the dumai,
Okay.
which is the channel that runs up the spine. So it starts kind of in the perineum, and then it emerges from the body and comes up, like hugs the tailbone, goes up the spine, and wraps around the head, and it actually enters, there's a branch that enters into the brain as well. So that channel is really connected with the brain and with the central nervous system.
Wow.
And it would depend, of course, on each person, but I can see that playing a big role in healing from traumatic brain injury.
Well, I know from personal experience, I have gotten acupuncture needles in my head before and in my neck. So I do believe that point has been stimulated for me, as other points have too. But and that's pretty much what acupuncture is for somebody who hasn't done it before. It's really, you put some needles in these certain spots, these meridians, and then you would let them just sit with them for half an hour or however long. And yeah, I mean, is there anything more to it than that I'm not missing here? Or
you know, it depends. That's one way to do it. It kind of depends on what your purpose is with the needles. So if you're trying to tonify the body, like if there's something missing, there isn't enough of chi or blood or something, then you would insert your needle slowly and deeply, like you're drawing something into the body, and then you would probably leave it there for a while. If something's stuck, like blood stagnation or chi stasis, you're going to want to be, you know, a little bit sharper and maybe move it around, and then maybe pull it out, because you're trying to sort of move and then release.
That's called tonification, is that right?
That is called reducing.
Reducing,
so
okay.
Tonifying and reducing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty technical, but
yeah.
we don't need to know all this, but just, yeah, anyway. As far as the technique, but yeah, I mean, it is important to, if somebody who comes in, you know, just to know that there is a system behind what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's very technical.
Exactly, yeah. And there's different point prescriptions for different types of conditions, and I use those for sure, and I also just try to be as sensitive as I can to what's happening in the body, and the person's subjective experience plays into it a big part as well. And you know, what I feel in the pulse and in the meridian. So the point prescriptions are kind of like, one of my teachers described them as a cookbook of that was produced by people who've been practicing this medicine for a really, really long time, and noticed like these particular combinations of points work really well for this. So it's something that's a tool, but it's not something you would want to rely on completely, because the heart of this medicine is really being sensitive and using your body as a diagnostic tool to feel what's going on with somebody else, and then directly relating to that.
And then here we get to the heart, and I want to touch on these two systems here. We have, in Chinese medicine, the brain is understood as
the sea of marrow.
The sea of marrow, bone marrow. It's almost like it's, as I've always understood, it's sort of it's like an extension of the spinal cord almost. And you know, we have this marrow in our spinal cord, and then we get up here, and it's just, it gets expanded. And is that roughly the case in their thinking, or is that?
Those old dead sages, yeah.
Those old dead sages, what did they know, right? No, but they placed importance a lot. It seemed like they placed a lot of importance here because they called the heart
the emperor.
The emperor.
Yeah.
And maybe talk a little bit about that dynamic, the emperor and the sea of marrow.
Yeah.
Whatever your thoughts are on these two systems.
Yeah, I think it's very indicative of how Chinese medicine sees the world, that they place the self really in the heart. And the heart is kind of the driver as opposed to the brain. So intelligence and consciousness and awareness all emerge from the heart, not from the brain. But the brain is still important. The brain is sea of marrow, like you said, and that is under the domain of the kidney. Kidneys are very important in Chinese medicine. And the kidney and the heart together form an axis where they're each kind of polar opposites. You have the heart fire and the kidney water, and you know, one is kind of the ultimate yang, the other is the ultimate yin, and the relationship between those two is what gives rise to life. So what happens in between yang and yin, how they relate to each other, how close are they connected, are they moving together, and that is sort of the measure of health in the body. So the other thing I wanted to say about the sea of marrow and relationship to the Dumai, or the governing channel, which we talked about before, that goes up the spine. So that channel, as well as the bladder channel, which runs alongside each side of the spine, take the densest form of awareness, of consciousness, which is held in the kidneys, and literally squeeze it up, in, you know, because it's the opposite direction of gravity, squeeze it up the spine and up these channels. And as it moves up, it becomes more refined. And so when it arrives to the top of the body, to the top of the head, to the crown, it has become the most refined form of consciousness, which is what we experience as, you know, as awareness.
So strengthening these other organ systems can help that process, that flow, if you will, of energy coming up through and into the brain. It's almost like by healing another organ system in the body, it sort of, it moves the energy, and we maybe become more spry, or whatever you want to call it. And then the heart, there's also neural tissue in the heart as well, so it's no surprise to me that this is such a command center, and that there's this relationship between, you know, the sea of marrow and the heart. They're in communication. Is it almost like a marriage almost? Between the two? I don't really know how to say it.
And all the organs have a specific relationship with each other. So one of the ways to look at that is kind of like as a political system. That's one of the ways that the organs are understood as the 12 officials, which is in one of the medical texts, the Yellow Emperor's classic on medicine. And they talk about the heart's relationship to the lung, the heart's relationship to the kidney, and how they all relate to each other as like this functioning community, basically, that all do their part to keep the body healthy.
And they all have relevance. They all have in order for the whole system to thrive, it's sort of they all have certain needs, and they all need to be attended to, if you will. So we talked about, again, like there's a very technical system to this Chinese medicine, and you talked about the cookbook. And when you think cookbook, you think, oh wow, you know, like anybody could do it. But there's an element that you, Alexandra, bring to it, that there's the magic that you bring to this, because these are just tools, but ultimately behind it is your experience and what it is that you have to communicate through the needles. And maybe talk a little bit about, you know, what you personally bring for people who may be interested in coming to see you.
Yeah, so I practice at Heartspring Health, but my personal business is called Well Spirit. And I thought of that name, and sort of the image that goes with it is my best attempt to express exactly what you're asking, like what is my special piece, what is my special medicine? Because I believe that the spirit is crucial, the health of the spirit is crucial to not just keeping the body healthy, but also to weathering the storm of just having a body. You know, so we honor the entire cycle in Chinese medicine: birth and gestation, birth, and then, you know, the period of life where we're kind of getting stronger and building our bodies, and then also the period of life where there's decline and then death are part of the cycle. And so what I think, like, the broadest term of health really encompasses all of that, because ultimately we are all going to face illness and eventually we're going to die. And so how could we have a system of health that says we're trying to stave that off? You know, if we're embracing the whole of nature and kind of the blueprint of nature, then we have to figure out a way to maintain a broad sense of health through all of that. And so I think spirit is really the answer to that. That keeping the spirit healthy and serene helps the body be strong, but it also helps us tolerate and even learn from and grow from times when we aren't well in our bodies. Sure.
It's connecting, as if I'm hearing you right, connecting with spirit is in the tough times maybe a way to endure, and in the beautiful times a way to fully enjoy. You know?
Right.
Cool. Well, if you wouldn't mind, we'd maybe like some of the people at home would maybe like to see some of this in action.
So I'm gonna do an acupuncture demonstration, and I'll be needling the dumai, also known as the governing vessel, which runs up the spine, as well as the bladder channel, which runs right alongside the spine. So we're gonna start with the point do 16, which is right here in this little notch at the base of the occiput. And as you can see, the needles are very slender. They can bend easily. They're very thin. And so once the needle is inserted, there's sort of a sensation that we call the chi sensation, which is usually felt, hopefully, by both the person on the table and the person putting the needle in. And once we get that sensation, then we know that we've contacted the chi and we don't do any more manipulation, because we sort of just let the body do the work from there. So the second point I'm going to needle is also on the do channel, and it's right below the 5th thoracic vertebra here, and it's the 11th point, and it's right behind the heart. So the heart has a connection to these points right on either side here, and so this is kind of heart zone. And then we'll just do 2 more on the bladder channel. And let's actually go down to bladder 17, which is right below the 7th thoracic vertebra out here on the paraspinal muscles. And this is the point, it's on the bladder channel, but it's the point that is what we call the shoe point for the governing vessel. So point location is an important part of acupuncture. We want to find the area where the point is and where the chi is, and that's where we insert the needle. So there you have it.
Okay, Alexandra, thanks for talking with us today. It's been really informative and just surprisingly so. It's really great to sit here and talk with you and to see how much information you have to offer and how many tools you have going for you.
Thank you, Clay.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me to do this, and thanks for doing the work that you're doing. Really important work.
You know, my pleasure. But so how can people that maybe want to you know, experience some of these things that we're talking about and get some healing going for themselves for trauma, how can they reach you?
Well, I practice at a place called Heartspring Health, and so
this room
this is actually my treatment room.
Uh-huh.
So our website is www.heartspringhealth.com, and you'll be able to find me there. And I also have a personal website which includes links to my acupuncture work, but also my yoga teaching, and I lead kirtans, which is a group singing experience. So you can find out about all of that on my personal website, which is wellspirithealth.com.